Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Penn Vicarage on this lovely Wednesday morning. Don't know what you have planned for today. Me, I'm hoping for a game of golf if the weather holds up this morning, but looking good so far. Hope you have lots of things to look forward to today. Friends, we are working our way, as you know, through the Gospel of Luke. And today we're in chapter 6. To set the scene, Jesus has started his ministry. And he has been, he's picked his disciples, and today we pick it up sort of straight after that. So it's Luke 6, starting to read at verse 17. Jesus came down with them and stood on a level place, and a great crowd of his disciples and a great multitude of people from Judea, Jerusalem, and the coast of Tyre and Sidon. They come to hear him and be healed of their diseases, and those who were troubled with unclean spirits were cured. And all in the crowd were trying to touch him, for power came out from him, and he healed all of them. They looked up at his disciples and said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who are hungry now, for you will be filled. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you, when they exclude you, revile you, and defame you on account of the Son of Man. Rejoice on that day and leap for joy, for surely your reward is great in heaven. For that is what the ancestors did to the prophets. But woe to you who are rich, for you've received your consolation. Woe to you who are full now, for you'll be hungry. Woe to you who are laughing now, for you will mourn and weep. Woe to you when all speak well of you, for that is what the ancestors did to the false prophets. But I say to you that listen, love your neighbours, enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who so abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you. And if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do to others as you'd have them do to you." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Somewhat challenging words here this morning. You're in two parts here. First, you've got the bit about Jesus on the plain with the crowds, and the second bit you've got the Sermon on the Mount. Or should I? It's funny. In Matthew, it's the Sermon on the Mount. In Luke, it reads more like a sermon on the plain. So the first bit's all about the crowds. The second bit he's discussing with his disciples. Let's take them in the two bits at a time. Firstly, there's the bit about the crowd, and it talks about a lot. They come all the way from Judea, Samaria, and all the way from Tyre and Sidon, and so on. I mean, firstly, it is first true to say that they've come. They want lots of people want to hear Jesus, and I think that's really important. And they've come also because they want to be healed of their diseases. And I guess who wouldn't? Because and Luke's quite keen for us to hear the power of Jesus, that the power of God was working in him. So people came to hear, and people came to be healed, and they came in large numbers. And that's really important to recognise in itself, that Jesus clearly had enormous divine power in him, and Luke wants us to see that. But I think there's also I think a bit of a comparison here with John the Baptist. I think again what Luke is trying to see is that again John the Baptist was this great man in the desert, and they came from everywhere to go and listen to him. And I think what Luke wants us to hear is that Jesus is not less than John. In the same way that they came up, large crowd out to hear John, even greater crowds, if you like, came out to hear Jesus. And I think that's what Luke wants us to see. So, firstly, we need to see that Jesus was very popular, and lots of people came to hear him, listen to his words. They were hanging on his every word. That he was clearly a very, very spiritually powerful man, because he was healing a lot of people. But also, I think what Luke wants us to see also is that whilst large crowds came out to hear John, if you like, even greater crowds, because they came from Tyre and Sidon as well, extra sinners, you might say, also came to hear Jesus. So whatever John was, Jesus is greater. So I think the first point is about the greatness of Jesus. What theologians would say, the first point is Christological. The second bit is about these famous Beatitudes. And Jesus starts off by saying, "Blessed are the poor." Now notice in Matthew, it has Jesus as the blessed are the poor in spirit. In Luke, he has blessed are the poor. So what does Jesus mean by blessed are the poor? Well, blessed doesn't mean just happy. I mean, happy gives the impression of whippy-dee, and I'm happy today, and I'm not, more too much of a feeling thing. Blessed is somewhat deeper than that. Blessed is, it says you're in a kind of better place if you are if you're blessed. So it's happy, but it's kind of a lot more than happy. I'm just trying to think of the word. Sorry about that. It's so much more than just a state of happiness, which a feeling can come and go. Blessed is a much greater feeling than that. So what does it mean? Well, I also don't think he means that you have to be poor in order to be a Christian. I don't think you have to be poor in order to, to be a person of God. I don't think this isn't about how to become a Christian. I don't think that's what it means, because in the Bible there are also some very good rich people like Job and Joseph of Arimathea and various other rich people who are good as well. So I don't think it means that you have to be. It's not a way to become a Christian. You have to become poor. I don't think that's what it means at all. But I think it means you are in a better state if you are. Now, the thing with this is, we can easily get sort of cudgy and sentimental about this. What does it mean by we say we are blessed are the poor? Well, firstly, there's a sense in which we are. In the sense which, I don't know if you ever thought, but in a sense, the richer people get, in some ways, the more isolated they become. So people in the third world often live in villages, all together, working together as a community. Then in this country, the richer people get, they go from living in terraced houses to living in semi-detached houses to living in private houses to aspiring to live in places in Hollywood where great big estates surrounded by security fences and tracker dogs and armed security guards. And basically the richer people become in that sense, the more isolated, the richer they become. It's almost like they aspire to become more and more lonely, if you see what I mean. And in transport, we don't walk because we get the bus, so we go to a car so that we can become more and more on our own. So the richer, if we want, in a sense, the richer we become, the more private we become. So I think that's the point. So in some ways, the poor are happier because they're less, often have to be, less isolated. Poorer people tend to live more in community. So there's a sense in which richer people do become more isolated. So in a sense, you could say, woe is the rich, because do you see what I'm trying to say? So I think there's a sense in which that is true. But again, I think it's more than that, because what do we mean by poor? People who are poor means they haven't got something. And if they haven't got something, they know that they need something. And I think there's a sense in which, in the Christian life, if we think we've got it, people who have got things tend to have what they've got and try to defend what they've got. People that know that they haven't got know that they need more. And I think in a sense, the New English Version, which is not my favourite translation, talks about blessed are those who know their need of God. And I think in a sense, that's the kind of translation I'd like to have. To be poor in spirit, and I think to be poor in this means, doesn't just mean economically poor. I think it means to know that you need God. You see, people that don't think they need God don't ask for God, and therefore God is not involved in their lives. People that know the need of God cry out to God, call to God, and meet God, and know God. People that know that they need something, know that their lives are without something, push into God and receive from that way. People who are rich, people who think that they have everything, who think that they've got life set up, who don't know that they need God. You and I know that they do, but because they don't know it, they don't ask for God, and in a sense, they don't meet God. So in a sense, that's another reason why you are happier when you are poor in spirit, than when you know you need something, because that's when you cry out to God. And of course, having God in our lives is the happiest state of all. That's the second thing. The third reason why we are happier, in a sense, the poorer people are happier, in a sense, also is because when they are poor, when we are persecuted, that's what happened to the prophets of old. The Old Testament prophets like Jeremiah and Ezekiel, those people that walked closest to God, in the sense they often were persecuted. When they spoke difficult words to power, when they sometimes said God's words, which often aren't always what people want to hear. When people heard such things, they didn't always like it. And in a sense, sometimes people, when they spoke God's word and did God's will, people didn't always appreciate it. So in a sense, what Jesus is saying here is that when you are persecuted and so on, and when you find yourself poor sometimes like that, in a sense, you are following a great tradition. You are more like the great men and women of God of old. So he's saying you are happier in that situation too. So, I'm not sure I'm doing this very well, but I'm trying to explain. I think there's two bits of this reading. The first bit is this bit about the crowd. Jesus is spiritually powerful, and many, many people came to hear him. And as John had great crowds, Jesus had even greater crowds. So hear that. What does he mean by these Beatitudes? Okay, I don't think it means that you have to be poor in order to be a Christian. I don't think that's what it means at all. What does it mean then when he says, well, blessed or happier are the poor? What does he mean by that? I think firstly to remember that often that is the case, that the richer people become, and you can see it on Hollywood estates and things, the more isolated and often the less happy people can become. I think secondly, when we are poor, we know we need something. And when we know we need God, we cry out to God, we meet God, and having God in our lives is ultimately the greatest happiness that we can ever have, a lasting happiness. And the third thing is, when we often have difficult times because of our faith, we need to remember that's what happened to the great men and women of old, the great women of God of old. And if it happened to them, it's going to happen to us. So in a sense, if people give us a hard time for our faith, and when times get tough, actually we're following in a great spiritual tradition, and therefore we can be happy. It means we're getting it right. Difficult passage. I've done my best. I hope it makes sense. If you want to